I had surveyed the battlefield, jagged craters, toppled barricades, wrecked artillery pieces all sprawled out across the scarred landscape of cardboard and plastic terrain. Charred towers and gutted bunkers loomed like the skeletons of fallen giants. My army had held the line against overwhelming odds, unit after unit grinding down the oncoming swarm, until it was just the two of us left. 2 commanders, 2 warlords, a final decisive duel. I exhaled, picked up the white D6, and let it tumble from my fingers. It clicked against the table, skittered across the painted surface, bumped a ruined column, and spun to a stop in a crater. I leaned in. A single black dot stared up at me. Ah, damn. Across the table, Martin let out a chuckle. Snake eyes, huh? He extended a hand. Good game, Nick. Yeah, sure. I shook his hand, trying to hide the disappointment. You always this salty when you lose? He grinned. I snorted. Only when the dice have it out for me. He started packing away his units while I sulked. The post-match teardown was part of the ritual, but my mind was still on that final roll. That one roll that had cost me the game. For anyone out there who doesn't know, we weren't actually at war. We were playing a tabletop war game called Dominion Reforged, a mix of high fantasy and diesel punk. Think armored wyverns and blood-powered mechs. The game used dice rolls, stat sheets, and miniatures we painted ourselves. I got into Dominion a little later than most of the guys. In school, it was always the fringes, the weird, creative crowd who played. I wasn't cool enough for the cool kids, but not weird enough for the weird ones, so I missed out. I found it years later, on my own. A random Let's Play video led me to the lore, the fandom, the models. I was hooked. But the painting, that's what really drew me in. Tiny figures with enormous potential, blank slates ready to become warlords, knights, beasts. I spent hours hunched over a desk with a brush and magnifier. I was never a great player, but people respected my paint jobs. That's how I met Martin, actually. At a local con, he complimented a Hell Bastion mech I had done in black and brass. Next thing I knew, he invited me to his game nights. It felt like a kind of acceptance I didn't know I'd been craving. One weekend, after a close match, Martin asked if I wanted to buy some of his older units. They're well kept, he said. Limited editions. You won't find these sculpts anymore, but I got to warn you, they've got some personality. Meaning, he hesitated, they creep me out. I laughed. Seriously? He nodded, but didn't laugh with me. They were from this eBay haul a few years back. Some guy in Sweden sold me a whole army, still on sprue. Gorgeous sculpts, but weird, like overly detailed. Extra eyes, exposed organs, symbols I couldn't place. I painted them all in a week. Felt compelled, you know? But after that, I started noticing things. Sounds. Whispers. Whispers. Yeah, just dumb stuff. Breathy noises. Clacking. Always from the direction of the cabinet I kept them in. I raised an eyebrow. And your solution was to sell them to me? I'm telling you, he said. They're beautiful minis. Best I've ever painted. But they give me a bad feeling. I figured maybe it's just me. Maybe I just need them gone. I bought them, obviously. Curiosity outweighed caution. The models were stunning. Obscure faction, the cult of ethics. Not in the standard books. Pale, thin warriors in antique armor. Elongated limbs, sharp, angular weapons. Most had extra limbs or mechanical grafts. Their paint scheme shimmered strangely under light, blues that shifted to red when turned. I planned to strip them, repaint them in my own style, but I never got around to it. That night, I set the box down in my workshop and forgot about it. When I woke up, one of the models was on my nightstand. It faced me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, laughed it off. Must have moved it without thinking. The second night, another one was there. kneeling, blade raised like it had just finished off a sleeping foe. I stopped laughing. I boxed them up again, put them in a cabinet, locked it. 3 days later, Martin stopped answering texts. Then he missed game night. Then 2 weeks passed. Out of concern more than anything else, I drove to his place. His car was out front, but all the lights were off. I knocked. No answer. I called his name through the mail slot. Still nothing. The front door wasn't locked. Inside, everything looked frozen in time. Takeout containers. Dice scattered on the coffee table. A half-painted unit under a desk lamp. Upstairs, I found the master bedroom. Door closed. The smell hit me before I opened it. He was there, on the floor. Eyes wide, neck at an unnatural angle. Blood pooled under his cheek. Figures surrounded him in a perfect circle. I stood frozen until something moved in the far corner, a shift in the dark. I flicked the light on. It blew out instantly. Population darkness again. The silhouette stood. Not human. It had Martin's general shape, but something was wrong. Limbs too long, head slightly tilted like it was listening for prey. I backed up. 1 step, then 2. The thing darted forward. I turned and bolted, hit the stairs, missed a step, and tumbled to the bottom. Dazed but alive, I crawled to the door and flung myself outside. When I looked back, something stood in the doorway. Tall. Still. Watching. I never called the cops. I knew they'd never believe me. But I couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Back home, I found 2 Cult of Ethics models sitting on top of the locked cabinet. That night, I didn't sleep. I left every light on. I sat with a kitchen knife in my lap, watching the cabinet. Nothing moved, but I could hear scratching, soft and slow. It got worse from there. Every few nights, more models appeared in different places, on my stove, the bathroom sink, once even on the seat of my car. Always posed, always facing me. Then the dreams started, visions of a black sea, figures rising from its depths, a tower of bone, a voice whispering from beneath the waves, "Paint me anew." I tried selling them. Nobody would buy them. I tried giving them away, left them in a park. They were back in my apartment by the next morning. I don't know if it's the paint or the plastic or the act of creating them that binds them to me, but I know this. I'm part of it now, so I tried to end it. I took the figures, every last one, smashed them with a hammer, crushed them under a vise, and burned them in a metal barrel on my balcony. I wore a respirator. I didn't care about the neighbors. I had to be sure. For a while, it worked. A week passed. Peace. Then 2. Then, last night, I woke up to a single model standing on my chest. One of the destroyed ones, reassembled, perfectly repainted. I screamed. It fell to the floor and shattered. No glue, no joints, just brittle parts. But when I turned the lights on, there was another one, on the desk, staring at me. They're rebuilding themselves. Somehow, they want something. I think Martin knew near the end. That's why he gave them away. Not to escape them, but to warn someone, to pass the curse on. I don't know what to do, but I know I can't leave. If I go somewhere else, they'll follow. Or worse, someone else will find them. So I've made a choice. I'm staying here. I've boarded up the doors, barricaded the windows, armed myself with knives, hammers, lighters, anything I could get my hands on. I've started live streaming, posting, sharing everything I can. Because the one advantage I have is that I can tell people. I can expose this. I can ruin their secrecy. They thrive on secrecy. They hide in shadows and whispers and half-remembered dreams. But not anymore. If I die, let this post stand as evidence. Let it warn others. Don't trust the perfect paint job. Don't buy from sellers with no reviews. And if a friend offers you models with personality, run. They're out there, and they're still painting. I didn't want to say too much over the phone, Drew said as he parked the car. But the second I stepped inside, I thought of you. He pointed across the street at a squat, weathered Tudor-style house with ivy clinging to its bricks. The windows looked almost sad in the gray daylight. It was an estate sale. The owner's grandson just wants it gone. He said he'd take a cash offer tomorrow. Emily stepped out and sized the place up. It had charm, even if it was rough. The kind of place you fantasize about restoring, where every creak is history and every crack in the plaster has a story. And look, Drew added, no neighbors for 50 feet in any direction. That's privacy you won't get anywhere this close to the city. Emily nodded slowly. The house was weird, but she liked weird. Inside, it smelled faintly of mildew and stale wood polish. The entry opened into a long hall with dark crown molding and a cracked mirror on the wall opposite the stairs. A few boxes of junk and old furniture were still stacked in corners like afterthoughts. Drew shrugged. He said they were in a rush. Most of the stuff in here is junk. But the mirror caught Emily's eye. It wasn't a wall mirror exactly. It was built into the structure, rimmed with carved wood that had warped slightly over time. It was massive, 7 feet tall and maybe 3 wide, streaked with age but still mostly reflective. She stared at it for a moment too long. "You want it?" Drew joked. "I'm sure we could write it into the deal." Emily didn't answer. Something about the mirror felt aware. By sundown, the offer was made. Moving in was anticlimactic. Emily didn't have much. A mattress, a couple of chairs, books, her cat, a record player. The previous owner had left behind some basics. An old stove, a working fridge, and the mirror in the hall. She didn't know why she hadn't taken it down. Maybe because it looked like it belonged. Maybe because it looked like it didn't want to be moved. The first night, she slept in the bedroom upstairs with the window cracked. The cat, Felix, padded softly across the floor and meowed at the hall before slinking away. She chalked it up to cat stuff. By the third night, the dreams started. Not nightmares exactly, just deeply uncomfortable images. In the dreams, she'd walk down the upstairs hallway toward the mirror, but the house was flipped, unfamiliar. The furniture was old-fashioned. A woman, not her, was brushing her hair in front of the mirror. And then, as the woman raised her hand to her head, she froze and stared straight at Emily. Not into the mirror, at Emily. Emily always woke up sweating, heart pounding. Felix wouldn't come near the hallway anymore. He'd hiss at the mirror and run the other way. She tried to ignore it. She painted the kitchen, installed new light fixtures, dragged a vintage couch into the living room. She hung plants and vinyls and made the house feel like hers. The mirror stayed. She tried to avoid looking at it. When she passed it, she kept her eyes forward. Sometimes she caught a glimpse of herself, or something that felt like herself, out of the corner of her eye. Once, she could have sworn she saw her reflection smiling when she wasn't. A week in, Drew came by with some takeout and a 6-pack. "I still can't believe you actually went through with it," he said, looking around. "It's got serious haunted energy." Emily smiled weakly. "It's got personality." He walked down the hallway, noticed the mirror, and whistled. "This thing is wild, creepy as hell." "Yeah," she said. "I can't decide whether to keep it or not." He ran a hand along the carved wood. "Feels like one of those cursed antiques on YouTube, the kind where the family dies mysteriously and nobody makes the connection until years later." Emily rolled her eyes. "That's encouraging." He laughed, then leaned closer. "Okay, that's odd. Look at this." Emily walked over. He pointed to the bottom right corner of the mirror, where something had been etched faintly into the silver backing. It wasn't quite visible unless you caught it at an angle. A word. Inherit. That night, she dreamed again. Same hallway, same mirror. But now the woman brushing her hair looked more like Emily, only older, harsher. She was muttering something, over and over. Emily couldn't hear the words, but she understood the feeling. Loneliness, anger, possession. When she woke, she found Felix cowering under the bed. His tail was puffed, his ears flat. The mirror had fogged over, like someone had breathed on it. She tried to move it the next day. Called a handyman, said she wanted it taken off the wall. He came, gave it one look, and said, "No way that's coming down easy. It's probably anchored into the studs. Might be structural." Structural? Emily didn't argue. She let him go. That night, the dream continued. Same woman. This time, she was sitting in a rocking chair, staring into the mirror, whispering to herself. Emily could see herself reflected again, not as a viewer, but inside it, like she was stuck, trapped behind glass. She started avoiding the hallway entirely. She took the long way through the kitchen just to go upstairs. Felix stopped eating. The house felt darker, like it absorbed light instead of reflecting it. One night, Emily took sleeping pills just to get some rest. She woke up in front of the mirror, standing barefoot in the hall, eyes wide open. She didn't remember getting up. Her reflection didn't match. Her reflection was smiling. She taped a sheet over the mirror. She slept through the night for the first time in days. But in the morning, the sheet was on the floor, and something new had been etched beneath the first word, submit. She called Drew. He offered to come by. She said no. Instead, she spent the whole day researching antique mirrors, folklore, spirit traps, scrying glass, obsidian portals. Nothing she found made much sense, but it all pointed to the same idea. Mirrors can be thresholds. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in front of the mirror, flashlight in hand, phone recording. Nothing happened. She waited, and then, just after 3 a.m., the mirror fogged. From the inside, a handprint pressed against the glass. Emily stepped back. Then her reflection stepped forward. Not a trick, not a shadow. It moved when she didn't. It tilted its head, smiled slightly, raised a finger, and traced another word in the condensation. Return. Emily turned and ran upstairs, heart pounding. She woke the next morning with a splitting headache and a memory of a voice in her ear. Software female, her own. You belong here. You always have. By the end of the week, Felix was gone. The mirror was clean. The etchings were gone. Emily's voice sounded different to her, like someone had tuned it slightly lower, like it was deeper in her throat. She caught her reflection laughing once when she wasn't. She laughed too, just to match it. When Drew returned with lunch and a few records, she opened the door slowly. He hesitated. You okay? Emily smiled wide, too wide. I'm perfect, she said. Her eyes didn't blink. She led him down the hall to the mirror. I kept it after all, she whispered. Doesn't it make the house feel alive? He didn't answer. He was staring at the reflection. There were 3 of them in the mirror, but only 2 in the hallway. It is with trembling hands and waning strength that I begin this account. Any moment now, I may lose the ability to speak or write. There is a knock I expect, a knock that will mean silence forever. But until then, I must relay what has happened, not just for my own sanity, but in the hope that someone, somewhere, will heed my words. This began not more than a month ago, though it feels like a century of waking nightmares. Whether you believe me or not is your concern. Some will call me mad. Others will say I was driven to delusions by grief, guilt, or solitude. But I assure you what I saw was real. Too real. And it follows me still. The date was Wednesday, November 9th, 1927, when I first set out from London. I was weary of the city and of its constant motion. The passing of my father had left me adrift, unmoored from all responsibility, with a modest inheritance and nowhere to be. I was 32 years old and utterly alone. I wanted isolation, solitude, peace. I wanted silence. So I looked northward. By mere coincidence, or perhaps fate, I read of a small, secluded village named Branswell-on-the-Moor, located deep within the North Yorkshire moors. There were barely 300 residents, no train station, and few modern conveniences. A map described it only as a remnant of another time. I rented a small cottage on the outskirts of the village. The place had been vacant for years, according to the solicitor, but it was cheap, dry, and remote. I thought it ideal. When I arrived, the air was colder than expected. The sky hung low, and the moors breathed a constant, whispering wind. The village, little more than a cluster of gray stone houses and a leaning church, seemed to watch my arrival. Children stopped playing when I passed. Men paused mid-chore. Women peered from behind curtains. Still, I was greeted with courtesy, polite if distant. The villagers spoke carefully, as though their words might carry too far. My cottage, a squat building of heathered stone and moss-covered tiles, stood a mile outside the village proper. There was no electricity, no telephone. The key stuck in the lock, and the door groaned like a wounded animal when opened. Inside was cold, quiet, and musty. I felt it the moment I stepped inside. A weight, invisible but undeniable, settled onto my shoulders. That first night passed uneventfully, though I struggled to sleep. The wind howled against the windows, and the floorboards above creaked often, though the upper level was empty. On the second night, I heard a knock. It came just after midnight, a single soft rap on the front door, then silence. I rose, hesitated, and approached. No one was there. I told myself it was wind or a falling branch. The mind plays tricks when it's dark and quiet and unfamiliar. Still, I double-locked the door. On the third night, the knocking came again. This time, twice. Again, I found no one. But when I turned back toward the sitting room, I noticed the old mirror on the wall was fogged, as if someone had breathed on it. I hadn't lit a fire. The air was frigid. By the fourth day, I was no longer sleeping. I spent hours in the village speaking with whoever would indulge me. Most claimed not to know much of the cottage. Old place, they said, not been lived in for decades. An elderly man named Harold, the proprietor of the small village store, finally gave me something useful. He told me that a woman once lived there, Marjorie Fenwick, a widow. Strange sort, he said. Talked to no one, wrote in a strange language. Disappeared one night. Never found. I asked if she had family. None that ever came looking. That night I found the attic door open. I had not opened it. I climbed the ladder with a candle in hand. Dust choked the air, but the floor was swept clean, and in the center stood a tall, wooden chair, facing the window. On the floor, symbols drawn in chalk, circles, interlocking triangles, spirals with no end. A diary rested on the windowsill. I opened it. The writing was illegible at first, curved, sharp strokes like claws dragging across paper. But toward the end of the book, it shifted to English, and one line repeated over and over. The knocking comes for what it is owed. I do not remember descending the ladder, only that when I next looked up, the attic door was shut again, and I was standing in the kitchen, the candle long melted to nothing. The next several days blurred together. I did not eat. I barely drank. The knocking returned each night, louder, more insistent. Sometimes on the walls, sometimes on the floor beneath my bed, sometimes above. One night I found red handprints on the inside of the windows, human-sized but stretched unnaturally long. The next, the mirror had cracked. I had not touched it. I tried to leave the cottage, but the car refused to start. I walked to the village only to find the paths unfamiliar, twisting in ways they hadn't before. I walked for hours in a circle. The cottage stood in front of me each time. The people were gone. The village, empty. Even Harold's store was boarded up. But the bread on the counter was still warm. And then, on the 7th night, it came inside. I do not know how. The doors were locked, the windows latched. But I woke to find the candle lit beside me and the smell of rot thick in the air. A shadow stood at the foot of the bed. I could not see its face, only its shape. A thin figure, arms longer than they should be, reaching down nearly to the floor. It said nothing, did nothing. It only knocked. Once, on the bed frame. Then it vanished. I spent the next day digging. The earth behind the cottage was soft, recently disturbed. 2 feet down, I found a box. Inside, bones, small, human. I took them to the church, thinking perhaps the vicar might know what to do. But the church was silent, its doors locked. I broke a window to get in. The altar was gone, replaced by a crude stone basin. The pews had been turned inward, facing each other, and the walls were carved with the same symbols from the attic. I burned the box that night. I poured kerosene and watched the flames climb. I thought that would end it. It didn't. The knocking came again, this time from inside the walls. And then, voices, not words, just sounds, wet, garbled sounds like someone speaking through water. On the 10th day, a letter arrived. No stamp, no address, only my name on the envelope in the same handwriting from the diary. Inside was a single sentence. You cannot bury what was promised. I will not recount the rest. Some things are better left unsaid. I have seen too much, heard too much, and I know now what it wants. It does not knock to ask permission. It knocks to remind me that I am next. I have not slept in days. My reflection moves when I do not. The walls breathe. The trees lean toward the house. Tonight, the knocking has not stopped. It began at dusk and has continued for hours. From the door, the ceiling, the floorboards beneath my chair. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. Do not come looking for the village. Do not look for the cottage. Do not answer the knock. Please. I always knew there was something wrong with the old closet, but I never expected what I found. Inside, I was 8 when we moved into the house on Willow Lane. My parents had finally scraped together enough to buy their first home after years of renting. The place wasn't flashy, but it had a huge backyard and a big wraparound porch. My dad called it a project, which I would come to understand meant a house that needed serious work. But as a kid, it looked like a mansion. My room was on the 2nd floor at the end of a creaky hallway. It had 2 windows and a big walk-in closet, which at first seemed cool. I could hide in there, read books, make it a secret clubhouse. But something about that closet felt wrong the first time I opened it. The air inside was colder and not like regular drafty old house cold. It was sharp and still. The walls were painted a pale green, unlike the rest of the room, and there were long discolored patches that looked like something had been smeared and then painted over. The closet stretched deeper than it should have, more like a narrow hallway than a storage space. When I tapped the back wall, it echoed faintly, hollow. That echo would haunt me. I tried to brush it off. I was a kid. Kids imagine things. That's what my mom always said, but it didn't feel imagined. Over the next few months, I avoided that closet. I'd pile boxes in front of the door and sleep facing the other way. I'd dream about whispering voices and cold hands brushing my ankles. And sometimes, late at night, I'd hear tapping. 3 soft knocks from inside the closet. Always 3. I'd hold my breath and squeeze my eyes shut. Sometimes I'd cry, but never loud enough to wake anyone up. When I told my parents, they told me it was just the house settling. I learned to stop mentioning it. One night, it got worse. I was thirsty and crept downstairs to get water. As I tiptoed past the closet, I heard it, soft crying like a child coming from inside. Not a ghostly wail, just a quiet, muffled sob like someone trying not to be heard. I froze. That kind of fear, the kind that goes bone deep and makes your teeth hurt, hit me all at once. I wanted to run, but I was rooted to the floor. Then it stopped. I opened the closet, slowly. Nothing. Just hanging clothes and that sickening, icy air. But when I leaned in, I heard it again. A whisper. Not words, just breathy, high-pitched noise that coiled into my brain and sat there like a worm. I slammed the door shut and ran to my parents' room. They were annoyed. My mom walked me back and opened the closet herself. Nothing. She even stepped inside to prove it. "There's nothing in here, babe. See?" But she didn't hear it. I begged to switch rooms. They told me I was imagining it, or maybe I'd been sleepwalking. That excuse held for a while. I learned to live with the closet like a prisoner learns to live with their cell. Things got worse the winter after my little sister Emily was born. She was beautiful, happy, chubby, full of giggles. I loved her more than anything. Holding her felt like holding the best parts of the world in your hands. That first year, I'd spend hours in her room, reading to her and making faces to make her laugh. She was light in a dark house. But around that time, the closet changed. The tapping turned into scratching. The cries started sounding less human. Sometimes I'd wake up with the closet door open. I never left it open. One night I heard something dragging across the floor in there. A slow scraping sound, like someone crawling. When I peeked under the door, I saw nothing. But I could hear breathing, just on the other side, deep and rattling. I told my parents again. They booked me a therapist. I tried to be normal. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be a good son, a good brother. But I knew something was wrong. Then one night, Emily disappeared. I woke to my mom screaming. Her crib was empty. The police came. They searched the entire house. They interviewed neighbors, family members, even me. Nothing. No sign of a break-in. No fingerprints. Just the window in her room, open a crack. No footprints outside. The official theory? A kidnapping. My parents were destroyed. My dad turned silent and withdrawn. My mom started drinking. I kept telling them, screaming at them, that it was the closet. They didn't listen. After 6 months of investigations and no progress, we moved. My parents couldn't take it anymore. The grief poisoned everything. We never spoke of the old house again. It sat vacant for years. Eventually, it was boarded up. But I never forgot. I became obsessed. I read about hauntings, missing children, paranormal cases, cult activity. You name it, I studied it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that closet and felt that cold, fetid breath. 15 years later, after my parents had long since divorced and moved on as best they could, I decided to go back. The house was still empty, still rotting. I told myself it was foreclosure, but I knew what I wanted. Answers, even if they tore me apart. I broke in through the side door. The smell hit me first. Mildew, rot, time. The house was silent. My old room was just like I remembered it. Smaller now, dust and decay everywhere. The closet door was shut. I opened it. Same cold air. Same faint echo. But now I was ready. I had brought tools. A crowbar, a flashlight, a recorder, and a knife just in case. I knocked 3 times. The same hollow sound came back. I took a deep breath, then swung the crowbar at the back wall with everything I had. The drywall cracked. I struck again, and a hole splintered open. Behind it, a narrow passageway, maybe 4 feet high. A tunnel. The air pouring out smelled foul, like rotting meat and wet soil. I crawled in. The tunnel led deep into the house's foundation. At the end was a small chamber, no more than 10 feet across. I shone my flashlight around and froze. Bones, tiny ones, dozens, stacked in crude piles, dolls with their heads torn off, symbols scrawled in what looked like dried blood, and in the center, a crib. It was blackened with age and mold, but inside was something wrapped in a filthy blanket. I reached out and pulled it back. What I saw didn't register at first. It wasn't a baby. It was something that had once worn a baby's skin, loosely, badly. A creature with 2 long limbs and milky eyes that opened the moment I touched it. I screamed and stumbled back, slamming into the wall. The thing began to move. Not like a child, like an insect, jerking and twitching. It unfolded itself and stood, taller than me, thin as a rail. Its mouth opened sideways. It spoke, not in words I understood, just noise, wet, clacking noise that hit me like pressure in my skull. I dropped my flashlight, scrambled out of the tunnel, and ran. I didn't stop until I hit the front door, then my car, then the street. I didn't look back. The police never found anything. They chalked it up to squatters and my overactive imagination. But I know what I saw, and now every night I hear that tapping again, on my bedroom closet door. 3 soft knocks, like it followed me, like it never left, like it's waiting. Oh, the Whistler of Willow Creek. "Come on, don't be such a baby," said Marcus, grinning as he leaned on his bike. Caleb, the new kid, stared at the forest clearing across the broken fence. "I'm not a baby," he shot back, but his voice was thin, nervous. "That's what all babies say right before they piss themselves," said Tyler, the red-headed loudmouth of the group. The boys stood at the edge of Willow Creek Woods, a place their parents told them to stay away from. A place whispered about in lunchrooms, on sleepovers, and behind the bleachers. The local legend said if you walked to the creek at night and whistled 3 times, something would whistle back. And then you were never heard from again. It was a hot, sticky summer evening in the rural town of Parson, Georgia, the kind of heat that made the air feel thick and mean. The boys, Marcus, Tyler, and Devin, had dared Caleb to go in and whistle, not just because he was new, but because they all wanted to prove something, that they weren't afraid, that the Whistler wasn't real. They all knew the stories. Everyone in town did. "Come on, man," Marcus said, smirking. "It's just a story. You go in, whistle, count to 10, come out. Then we're cool." Caleb hesitated. His hands were sweaty. He wasn't from Parson. He hadn't grown up hearing the tales about the Whistler, about the boy who disappeared in 1981, about the woman who was found with her throat torn open by something that didn't use a knife. But he'd heard enough in the 2 weeks since he moved here to know the woods weren't right. "You scared?" Tyler asked, leaning in close. Caleb swallowed hard. "Number. Let's just get it over with." He climbed the rusted gate and walked into the clearing. The woods felt alive, not like animals watching him, more like the trees themselves were leaning closer, listening. The air buzzed with cicadas. A small creek gurgled somewhere ahead. His shoes crunched softly over dead leaves and dried pine needles. He kept walking until he saw it, the spot. A wide clearing by the shallow creek, where the dirt formed a natural bowl. The Whistler's Bowl, they called it. He looked back. The trees swallowed the view of his friends. He was alone. Caleb took a breath. Then he whistled, once, twice, 3 times. Silence. He waited, feeling stupid. Just as he turned to leave, a whistle. It came from the trees behind him, low, slow, imitating his pattern. He froze. Every hair on his neck stood up. "Guys," he called out, his voice cracking. No answer. He started backing away when he heard it again. Closer this time. Whistle, whistle, whistle. Then a fourth, higher note, a variation, a mocking tone. Caleb turned and ran. Back at the edge of the woods, the boys waited. "Where the hell is he?" Marcus asked after 5 minutes. "Probably trying to freak us out," Tyler said, but he was less sure now. "Let's go in," said Devin. "Something feels wrong." "No way," Tyler said. "We agreed he had to do it alone. You go if you're so worried." Devin stepped through the gap in the fence, muttering under his breath. The other two hesitated, then followed. The forest swallowed them just as easily as it had taken Caleb. Inside, the boys walked slowly, calling for Caleb. No answer. Then they heard it. A whistle. Faint. But it wasn't Caleb's tune. It was different. It rose and fell in an eerie, almost mocking rhythm. The melody didn't sound human. It didn't sound like anything that belonged in the woods. "Is that?" Marcus started. Another whistle answered, from the other direction, and then a third, closer. "Guys," Devin said, his voice shaking. A twig snapped behind them. They turned, but nothing was there. Then the whistling started again, all around them now, like a song they didn't know the words to, a tune their bones recognized as dangerous. Tyler panicked and ran. He never saw the branch that struck him in the face, hard and fast. Marcus screamed and sprinted in the opposite direction. Devin stumbled back, tripping over a root, his flashlight tumbling away. Lying in the dirt, he looked up and saw something. A figure. Tall, thin. Its skin hung loosely over its face like an ill-fitting mask. Its eyes were sunken black pits, and when it opened its mouth, it whistled, loud, piercing. The tune was sharp, unnatural. It made Devin's eardrums buzz. He tried to scream, but the sound caught in his throat. The last thing he felt was a cold hand grab his ankle and drag him into the dark. Tyler woke up 2 days later in a ditch off County Road 14. Bloodied, mute. Marcus was found walking barefoot along the river miles away, covered in scratches, whispering the same tune over and over. Devin and Caleb were never found. The police searched the woods. Nothing. No signs of struggle, no bodies. Just an old pair of sneakers by the creek and a patch of disturbed dirt in the clearing. The town moved on, like it always did. Just another tragic accident. But now, every summer, when the heat rises and the air gets too still, someone hears it. A whistle. Low, mocking, from deep in the woods. And every few years, someone else disappears. They say the whistler of Willow Creek was once a man, a trapper, who lived alone in the woods a century ago. People say he was cursed by the land for something he did, something unspeakable. Some say he made a pact. Others say he simply went mad. But all the stories end the same. If you whistle 3 times by the creek and you hear a whistle back, run.